As Len said, welcome everyone to the May 10th meeting of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. My name is Stella Jordan. I'm the Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization, which this advisory council advises. To go through a few MPO housekeeping items here at the start, I want to read our notice of non-discrimination. So you are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/MPO_non_discrimination. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact me, Stella Jordan, of MPO staff at sjord@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675. To run through a few meeting guidelines for our meeting today, you will likely have joined the meeting with a muted microphone. Please remain muted unless you are actively speaking, but you do have the ability to mute and unmute yourself. If not already done so, please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. And to participate in the discussion, you can select the raised hand function, either by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen and a window will pop up with a raised hand button at the bottom, or via the reactions button in the toolbar, and one of us will call on you. And if you're joining us by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Again, if you have any questions or technical difficulties, please contact me via the Zoom chat box at sjordan@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675. I will turn it back over to Len for introductions.
Thank you, Stella. So the agenda says that we're going to end at 4:05, but I asked Stella to ask Bradley Putnam, who's managing the long-range transportation plan, to join us towards the end of the meeting, because I want to extend the chair's report to update you all on a vote that was taken regarding the LRTP, the long-range transportation plan, at the last MPO board meeting. So because that's going to take more time, and we may want to devote more time to the 3C letter, I'm going to skip the introductions. So I'll just ask you, if you make a comment or ask a question, if you could just quickly introduce yourself, then that would be great. But I will, since the public comments are on the agenda, and I'll ask if there are any public comments. Now, raise your hand electronically. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Are you, Stella?
I'm not.
Okay. Great. So now we'll move on to approval of past meeting minutes. There are 8 sets, so hopefully you had a chance to read them. But we have this at the beginning of the agenda. If we can't get a motion in a second now, I'll ask you to read some during the meeting, and then we'll come back to it at the end of the meeting. AC.
I move to approve all of them.
Oh,
I was going to say I have to abstain from September 8th, but that's it. The rest of them I'm ready to go. I just had some questions when I was going through them that I thought of. Not important right now.
okay, all right. So then we could do it in 2 groups. So then, Franny, are you willing to amend your motion to do all the meeting all the meeting minutes except for December 8th?
Yeah, but even if don't we have a quorum? Do we have a quorum even without Anna Christina's vote on that one?
Well, we don't. She's here, so she's abstained. So then she's part of the quorum, even if she abstains from that vote, so.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay, yeah, I move that we approve. I move to approve all except September 8th, 2021.
All right, thank you. I see David Montgomery's hand up. All right, and even his electronic hand, he's got a yellow hand and a human hand.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sure can.
So I'm sorry I was trying to catch you in time, but I actually need to abstain from several. So I have a substantive comment on one set of the minutes, and I have an agreed, I will vote to approve the ones I can, and the ones I need to abstain from are the ones I did not attend. So
Okay. All right. Then I think we're probably gonna end up going through these one by one. I mean, how many do you need to abstain from, David?
I have 4, unfortunately, or 5.
That's fine. It is what it is. It's fine, so.
I wasn't
so-
abstaining. I'm not abstaining from the couple that I wasn't at. I'm under the impression that it's okay to approve based on the recommendations of other people on the committee.
Yeah, that's my sense too, but some people aren't comfortable doing that, so
Yeah,
I generally,
But I just
if
want
they
to
want
make
to
sure it's
abstain,
okay
then.
if I don't.
No,
Okay,
I hear you. No, that's my feeling too, but some people prefer to abstain if they're not there. So
Okay.
whatever makes them more comfortable is generally what I do. So I hear you, so we'll, unless people are changing their mind about abstaining, we'll just kind of go through the minutes one by one, because I think they'll be faster. David?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll just point out that, yeah, it takes a little longer, but it doesn't interrupt. I mean, we're still a quorum, even if we abstain. The vote, as long as we do have a quorum, and I don't know the answer to that, but I assume we do have one. The vote is valid even if we abstain.
Yes. I mean, it's really a matter of whether the right, but what Franny was getting at is that you can still approve the minutes, so you can vote yes on the minutes even if you weren't there, and if people were amenable to doing that, then we could have like one big vote on all the minutes, where people who aren't at present are saying that they do approve. But if people do want to abstain from certain minutes, that we'll need to take those minutes separately. And I'm fine with that. We'll just rip through this, so John McQueen.
Yeah, I would move to proceed and quickly go through each one of them. I think, as David mentioned, he has some substantive comments to come on a few of them, and I'm sure other people do too. So I would also include September 8th, because I think that was a pretty important meeting, and there were a lot of comments on that. So I think maybe one by one, we've come this far. Let's get these things put to bed.
I hear you. I'm fine with that. So let us begin with the January 11th, 2023 meetings. Can I get a motion and a second to approve?
I move.
So,
I'll second.
so a motion by Franny and a second by Christina. Comments, questions?
No.
Okay, not hearing any. So we are going to do a roll call vote because we are virtual. So Stella, please.
All right, Len Diggins.
Yes.
Okay, Franny Osmond,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Anna Christina Fregoso.
Yes,
Okay, Scott Sudeikis,
Yes.
David Montgomery.
Abstain.
Okay, Owen McDonald.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. And Andy Reeker.
I'll abstain here.
All right, so that motion carries.
Great, thank you. So our January 12th, 2022 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion in a second, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, so a motion by Franny and a second by John McQueen. Comments, questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Stella, please.
Okay, Len Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Anna Christina Fregoso,
yes,
Scott Sidakis,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
David Montgomery, okay, I'll get back to David. Andy Reeker,
Aye.
okay. I see John Stewart has joined. John,
What's that?
okay, I'll get back. Is David Montgomery back?
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm having internet problems, but I abstain on this one too.
Okay, thanks all. So that also carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, December 8th, 2021 minutes. Can I get a motion in a second, please?
Move.
For a motion by Franny, second, please.
Second.
Second by Anna Christina. Comments, questions?
I just wanted to quick comment on that. It set me off. We had the micro transit pilot program people that came and gave the talk. I'm wondering if we can have a follow-up just for you sometime in the near future on that study, on how the pilot went.
So let's consider that a new business item. I mean, I'm saying it's appropriate to bring it up here, but I'm factoring in as a new business item type of comment so that we will take it as such and try to get that scheduled sooner rather than later. Okay, try and do so when you're going to be at a meeting, which is most of them, but just make sure that we check in with you to make sure that you will be here. So great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All righty, Stella.
Right, Len Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Assman,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Anna Christina Fregoso,
Yes,
Scott Sidakis,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
David Montgomery,
Yes.
Andy Reeker,
Yes.
and I see Skylar Larrabee here. Skylar,
Yes.
okay, that carries unanimously. Len, I think you're muted, so.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Got a little noisy here. Thank you. So now we move on to the November 10th, 2021 meetings, meeting minutes. Now, can I get a motion in a second, please?
Move.
A motion by Franny and a second by Anna Christina. Comments, questions? Okay, not seeing or hearing anything. Stella, please.
All right, Len Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Assman,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Anna Christina Fregoso,
yes,
Scott Sidakis,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
David Montgomery,
Abstain.
okay, Andy Reeker,
Aye.
and Skylar Larrabee.
Yes.
Okay,
folks.
that motion carries.
All right, thank you. And so halfway through, now we're moving on to the September 8th, 2021 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion in a second?
Move.
Yes.
I think that was John McQueen who moved it. And then a second by David Montgomery. All right. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So questions, comments?
I have a little bit. I
Yes, sir.
think, it was an important meeting, as I recall. And there were a number of items in there that were cited that really deserve, there were action items and study items that I think deserve a follow-up and or go back and actually implement those and then report back. So I think there's further action reported or needed, I think, on actually half a dozen of those items, I believe.
All right. So as with AC's comments, I think the December 8th meeting, we'll consider that a new business item and put that on the agenda for, if not the next meeting, then a meeting in the very near future. Okay, and you can certainly drive that, John, if it doesn't happen as fast as you like. Okay, excellent.
Well,
Any other?
it's been September 8th, so we have some time.
Okay. All right. So don't delay if it's not necessary, so any other questions, comments? All righty, so Stella, please.
Lynn Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond.
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Anna Christina Fregoso,
Abstain. for this.
okay, Scott Zedekias,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
David Montgomery,
Yes.
Andy Reeker,
Yes.
and Skylar Larrabee.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries.
Great, thank you. So now on to July 14th, 2021 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion in a second?
Second.
I didn't get the motion, so it's probably on
Oh.
my end. So John, I heard your second. Who made the motion?
Oh.
Did you get that? Did you get that, Stella? Maybe. You
I
didn't get it?
didn't get it either.
I'll
Okay, all
move,
right.
I'll move.
Okay, Franny
Franny.
moves it, and John seconded. And so John McQueen seconded. Any questions, comments?
Yeah.
John, yeah.
Again, I think in this one, I would request that there's let's say, a post-evaluation from some of the items that MAPC had recommended as action items, as well as a post-COVID analysis that was suggested. That should be presented to us.
Okay. Great. So we'll add that as a new business item. As another set of new business items, so. Cool, anything else? Anyone else? All righty, please, Stella.
All right, Lynn Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond.
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Anna Christina Fregoso. I see you nodding your head. All right, Scott Zedekias,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
David Montgomery,
Abstain.
Andy Reeker,
Yes.
and Skylar Larrabee.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries.
All righty, thank you. So the June 9th, 2021 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion in a second, please?
Move.
Anna
Second.
Christina, and most makes a motion and Franny seconds. Any questions, comments?
Yeah.
Yes, David.
Just a small point, on the attendance list, Steve Olenoff of the town of Westwood is listed. And I'm pretty sure that their status is still as a non-voting member.
Okay.
And so for quorum purposes, or in voting, that's
Right.
You're saying he's noted there as a voting member and it should be switched to non-voting, David?
yeah, whenever Westwood participates, it's non-voting, yeah. Because they're on the MPO, or
Yep.
he serves in that alternate capacity.
Right.
Thank you for flagging that change.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Any other questions, comments? All righty, please, Stella.
All right, Lynn Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Anna Christina Fregoso,
Yes.
Scott Zedekias,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
Andy Reeker,
Yes.
David Montgomery,
Yes.
Skylar Larrabee, Skylar, all right. Well, still carries
Okay, great.
without,
And the last set of minutes, you know what, Stella, I think it was good that we did these at the beginning of the meeting, because I think if we saved this to the end, we would have lost like half the group, after the first half. But the last set, April 14th,
Yes.
2021 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion in a second?
Second.
Move.
Oh. I'll
Ooh.
move. No, I jumped the gun.
Let's try that again. Move.
Feels if it's some kind of a time warp
Well-
where the future is happening before. So,
Well,
a
I'll
motion-
start.
a
go
motion
over.
by Franny and second by John Queen. Questions, comments?
Yeah. In this, there was a suggestion for a look back on the Shared Streets program. That would be helpful for us to receive that presentation.
Another new business item. I like it. So you're helping like flesh out the agenda for like the next 3 months,
Actually, I had a comment also on that one. We could still get a guest speaker on getting the design help to municipalities, which is gonna be in the 3C letter. So I was gonna bring it up then.
Okay.
I gave it to Franny as a bullet.
Right. And we did discuss that a bit on Friday. So, okay. So any other questions, comments? Okay, so Stella, please.
All right, Lynn Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Anna Cristina Fregoso,
Yes.
Scott Sudeikis,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
Andy Reeker,
Yes.
David Montgomery,
Abstain.
Skylar Larrabee,
Yes. For the last time, for some reason, my space bar didn't work to unmute me. That's all.
okay, thanks, Skylar. And then I see we have a couple other members joined, so Fred Mosley
Yes.
and John Seward. All right, not hearing John,
Yeah.
but
All right.
John? We're voting, how do you vote on the April 14th, 2021 meeting minutes, John? All right, there may be some
Yeah.
audio trouble there, but I
Yeah.
think, so either way, motion carries on that.
Yeah.
And thank you all for bearing with us,
Well-
especially those who aren't voting on these minutes, but
Yeah.
it's good to get through the backlog, so I
Yeah.
appreciate all
Yeah,
of the
Well done.
patience here.
Well done.
Yeah, thanks for all your hard work on this. Really appreciate it. I know it's not your fault that we are in this catch-up situation, but you're doing well. I mean, and I know that having a more thorough set of minutes will come in handy when some of us want to do research and going back and looking at things from a distant past can be insightful. So sometimes like a marriage recommitment, maybe we'll just like toss in some minutes from a distant meeting and take a look at them. So anyways, moving on, so we have a special guest here today, a relatively new member of the MPO staff. Judy Taylor is going to discuss with us the MPO environmental and resilient work, the goals and ideas for the resilience program and priorities for incorporating resilience and climate adaptation into transportation planning. So we're a little bit behind schedule, Judy, but don't let that change your presentation. We have 10 minutes buffered, which I just let the members know that we're going to be using. And so please proceed as you plan, all right?
Great, thanks so much, Len. I do have some slides, so let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can y'all see that?
Sure.
All right, so hi, everybody. So my name is Judy Taylor. I am the MPO's Climate Resilience and Air Quality Transportation Planner. And as Len said, I'm relatively new. I started back in July as the first person at the MPO in this position. So I'll be going through a few slides on resilience and transportation before kicking off a larger group discussion. And I just wanted to thank the chair and the board for inviting me here and hosting this discussion today. So during this presentation, I'll be covering some background material on resiliency. A lot of this might be familiar to some of the folks on the call who represent environmental organizations or who work with this type of material a lot. But just for level setting, I'll be going over some resilience basics and projections for the Boston region. The second part of my presentation will cover resiliency work at the MPO, specifically how staff have and will be incorporating resilience into MPO work, as well as the 3 certification documents. And then we are planning to open this up for discussion. So most of my time, hopefully, will be hearing your thoughts and ideas for resiliency work at the MPO. any feedback you might have, or specific areas you think we should be focusing on. So to start, what is resiliency? Or maybe a better question is, how might we define resilience? Because this is one of those words that have been defined in a bunch of different ways. But the one that we've been using is the ability of a system, community, project, or other entity to anticipate extreme events, absorb their impacts, recover in a timely and efficient manner, and adapt to better withstand future disturbances. I also have specified here that we're talking about climate resilience, which just specifies that the types of extreme events are climate driven, such as heavy precipitation events, winter weather, extreme temperatures, and things like that. So there are several hazards that are currently and will in the future impact the Boston region, but most notably I'll call out rising temperatures, sea level rise, and changes in precipitation as some of the key concerns. So according to the 2022 Mass Climate Change Assessment, which came out very recently, inland parts of Massachusetts will experience 25 days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit annually by 2050, and 55 days over 90 degrees by 2090, which is compared to just 4 days over that temperature historically. So that's a pretty significant jump. And more coastal parts of the state won't experience as drastic a change in extreme heat days, although this might be offset by the urban heat island effect in the more developed parts of the Boston area. So there is a little bit of variation in that. In terms of sea level rise, the relative mean sea level in Boston Harbor is expected to rise between 0.8 and 2.1 feet by 2050, which will have an impact on the number of flooding events from both high tides and storm surge. This is a pretty big range, 0.8 to 2.1 feet, but that mostly has to do with different scenarios of global emissions reduction, but I tend to fall somewhere in the upper middle of that range. And for changes in precipitation, parts of the Boston region may experience up to 12% more annual rainfall by 2070, but those individual rainfall events are expected to become essentially more weird, more variable, more severe, but punctuated by periods of drought in between. So what does that mean specifically for transportation and transportation infrastructure, which is what we're primarily concerned with at the MPO? So this graphic from the 4th National Climate Assessment shows the types of transportation infrastructure, as well as operational performance goals that may be vulnerable to climate change. And they're specifically looking at that heat, coastal flooding, and heavy precipitation that I mentioned earlier. So we're going to be concerned about impacts to bridges, roads, rail, airports, marine ports, public transit, and tunnels, all of which the Boston region has, as well as operations and goals such as construction projects, safety, sustainability, freight movement, the condition of infrastructure, traffic congestion, and system reliability. And when we look more closely at the term vulnerability, when we say that these assets could be vulnerable to climate change, there are a few things that are kind of baked into that determine whether something, be it a building, a roadway, a community, et cetera, will be impacted by an extreme event. So we can look at exposure, which is the location of something relative to a potential hazard. So for example, a road within a flood zone is more exposed than a road outside of a flood zone. We can look at sensitivity, which describes the characteristics of something that determine its response to an extreme event. So for example, keeping with our road example, a road with poor pavement condition is more sensitive or more likely to be impacted by a flood event than a road that's been paved more recently. And last, we can look at adaptive capacity, which is the ability of something to adjust to or cope with the impacts of an extreme event. So for example, a community that has only one evacuation route in the event of a storm has a lower adaptive capacity than a community that might have multiple ways out. And one last bit of background information that I feel it's important here to differentiate between the two different ways that people tend to combat climate change. So we're looking at adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation refers to adjusting to current and future effects of climate change, which is primarily our resilience building work, such as building flood barriers or rain gardens. Mitigation, on the other hand, refers to preventing the effects of climate change itself by reducing the drivers, which is greenhouse gas emissions. which, while equally relevant to transportation and infused in MPO work in other capacities, isn't necessarily the focus of this presentation. So now that I've covered some of the basics, I'll talk a little bit about how the MPO and CTPS staff have incorporated resilience themes into MPO work and the planning process as a whole. So resilience has been included in the Long Range Transportation Plan, or LRTP, vision, goals, and objectives, which guide the MPO's investments and studies over a 30-year planning horizon, since the last document, Destination 2040, was released around 4 years ago or so. So this was an initial look at incorporating resilience into the MPO's vision for the transportation system. And the kind of perspective of this was to fit resilience improvements alongside system preservation and sort of state of good repair work. And this kind of reflects the initial methodology of starting with a maintenance project or a transportation project and seeing where resiliency could fit into that. This excerpt is from our new long-range plan that will be released for public comment this June or July. And you can see that the approach this time is a little bit different. So we looked at having resiliency as its own standalone goal, trying to start with identifying resilience concerns and prioritize investments, specifically in equity and overburdened communities with nature-based adaptation strategies whenever possible. So we went a little bit more specific and definitely a little bit more intentional with how we want to approach resiliency in the next kind of phase of planning. So next, staff have been conducting analyses and gathering data to support the needs assessment of the long-range plan. The needs assessment will be released alongside Destination 2050 in June or July, hence the coming soon. But as a spoiler of some of the work that you might be seeing, we've used the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model, or MCFRM, to look at transportation infrastructure exposed to coastal flooding. We've used data from MAPC to identify areas of concern for extreme heat. We've also gone through Boston region municipalities, MVP, or municipal vulnerability preparedness reports to identify resilience trends and concerns, among a lot of other things. So be on the lookout for that in the next month or so. And I'll also plug that Betsy Harvey of CTPS staff will be giving an overview of these findings at the MPO meeting on May 18th. So next, resiliency is incorporated in the criteria we use to select projects for programming in the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. So projects come to us at about 25% design, and we use that design to award points in a variety of categories, now including resiliency and other environmental topics. So for example, a project can earn points for considering future climate conditions, for utilizing nature-based adaptation, if there is a climate concern nearby, for addressing an issue identified in a town's MVP report, for improving the stormwater drainage system, for reducing the urban heat island effect, selecting a design that avoids damage to natural areas, among other kind of similar criteria. Additionally, what's kind of unique about the resiliency criteria is that projects can lose points for a few things, such as being located in a flood zone and not addressing flooding as part of the project design, or for having the potential to cause harm to a sensitive natural area. And for anyone who's interested in the TIP or providing public comments, the 2024-2028 TIP is now available for public comments through May 17th. If anyone has thoughts on the environmental piece of that, I'm welcome to answer questions as well. So next, we have a discrete resilience program that promotes resilience work at the agency, coordinates among groups within CTPS, explores various data sources, and connects with external agencies such as the T, MAPC, and MassDOT. We now include resiliency as well as climate change concerns in the MPO-funded corridor and intersection studies, where those themes are relevant. They don't always apply. But when they do, staff look at resilience and climate concerns that may impact the study. So staff completed a study in 2021 titled Exploring Resiliency in MPO-Funded Corridor and Intersection Studies that was funded through our Unified Planning Work Program, sort of to lay the foundation of how resiliency and transportation coincide and how to include resiliency considerations in the studies that we were already doing. And I have this study linked further on in the slides and can share that with you all as well. And last, this one is kind of more related to the greenhouse gas emissions side of things, but thought it was worth mentioning. Staff are currently working on a study that's also funded through our UPWP to explore electrification and decarbonization in the freight and logistics sector, specifically in parts of northern Suffolk County, including Chelsea, Revere, and Everett. So if anyone has questions on that study or wants to hear more about it, please feel free to reach out. So my next slide is talking about future resilience work. So here I have an ever expanding list of resilience work that staff are kind of gearing up for, which is very open to your feedback and thoughts. So first, we're looking to expand on the vulnerability assessment work we started for the needs assessment and really dive into pulling in more data to get at the full picture of vulnerability of the transportation infrastructure in the region that the MPO can kind of have a hand in addressing. We are planning to look at the components of a resilience improvement plan as laid out in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Laws Protect program and consider developing one or components of one for the Boston region to complement the one that's currently in development at the state level. Next, we're planning to expand our engagement with local environmental groups and stakeholders in order to bring more people to the table that haven't historically been very involved with MPO work and better consider local needs and knowledge in MPO work in the planning process as a whole. Next, we're starting to think about how to include hazard data and information, such as the Mass Coastal Flood Risk Model, into our travel demand model to get at how mobility and traffic congestion could be impacted by different scenarios of flooding and kind of fill in that kind of gap that isn't really being addressed by all of the other work going on in the region. We're starting to identify resilience and climate metrics to combine with equity and demographics data to try to quantify areas with disproportionate climate burdens in the region. We're looking to develop more public-facing material to help inform people on transportation resilience, as well as the components of resilient project design, again, while being mindful of what's already been done and what's already available. We're looking to evaluate the environmental and resiliency tip criteria I discussed earlier, to really see how successful this has been in improving resilience since we started implementing that in the tip and see if any changes need to be made. And last, we are planning to explore new federal funding sources for resilience improvements, such as the PROTECT program established by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in coordination with our partners at MassDOT. So here I just wanted to really quickly share a few resources. And again, I can send these slides around so you have access to these links. So there's the CTPS study on resilience in corridor and intersection studies that I mentioned earlier. There's a link to CTPS's All Hazards Planning application, which is an interactive web-based app that has hazards data and location of transportation infrastructure that is sort of ever evolving as we find new data sources to put in there. And a few resources from other agencies that we've been referencing quite a bit. So such as the 2022 Mass Climate Change Assessment, the MBTA's mode-specific vulnerability assessments. MAPC has a great climate vulnerability page. I have linked Mass DEP's Stormwater Handbook and a link to the state's MVP program that has the planning reports and locations of areas where grants have been awarded. So that is all I have for slides and enough of me. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you all now and to hear your thoughts and experiences with resiliency when it comes to transportation. So I do have a few discussion questions to kick us off. What do you see as the greatest climate threat to transportation in the Boston region? What do you see as the MPO's role in resilience building? What kinds of support, data, information, et cetera, related to climate change and transportation resilience could the MPO provide to support your understanding of vulnerability in the Boston region? And what topics do you suggest the MPO resilience program focus on? And I can post these in the chat so I can take down my screen share and see you all again. But thank you again for having me and looking forward to opening the floor for your thoughts. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Julie. That was wonderful. It was really, really good. Nice and concise, clear. And so I will turn to my colleagues' questions, and I see your hands up, and I'll take them in the order that I see them. so that they're listed. That is, so Andy Reeker.
Great. Echoing what Glenn just said, great, very punchy, precise, kind of quick presentation for us to get caught up. Appreciate actually having that. And I think if you're not already posting it online, I think it's structured really well. So I do know, I think there's another City of Cambridge, Layla, another one of my colleagues who's here. So I think Layla may also have some questions as well. But just at least for myself, more specific to transportation. I know in Cambridge, we've actually studied more about the urban heat island issue. And one of the things that have come up is the difference between the kind of, I think the traditional way of looking at high heat is just focused on the ambient air temperature. And we're starting to realize that humidity and heat index is actually the bigger factor from maybe more of a public health perspective. So I actually have kind of two questions. I'm wondering if you're seeing that the other municipalities around the region have also kind of reckoned with the heat index and the combined effect of heat and humidity, and whether that's in, kind of starting to roll into how, maybe region-wide we can take a look at the issues that come up with that. This is an important piece when it comes to public transit users, because a lot of the times, you just have to wait outside at a bus stop and you just have to deal with the conditions, which is different than what how you deal with some of the other transportation issues. And then two, are you all working with any of the public health researchers that are really focused in on just kind of more of a public health perspective? Because I think that those perspectives are actually really revealing about how we, approach these kind of issues, even though it is more infrastructure and transportation oriented.
No, those are really great questions. And for the first part about the heat index and humidity, I can kind of explain a little bit about the data source that we use when we look at the urban heat island effect. So MAPC it's a census tract level data set that looks at the difference between land surface temperature from like Landsat data compared to air temperature. So it's kind of the differential in terms of what the weather app on your phone is saying the weather is and what the felt temperature on the ground is. But that being said, I don't know if that includes humidity, and I think that's a really great point that you make, and it's something that we could definitely look into, or at least understand that that's at play, because when we look at what we're going to be doing about these things, it's making sure that the public transportation system is safe for riders. Are there bus shelters? Are there trees around that can help provide shade? So that's really an important point, and thank you for bringing that up. And in terms of working with public health researchers, that's something that we haven't really explored, and it's definitely something that has a lot of value. So I'll take that note and look how we can do better with that.
Anything else, Andy? I guess not. So
Nope,
all right,
that's it for me.
So Anna Christina, first, is it okay if I call you AC? Because I see it in your name.
This is fine.
Okay,
AC.
great.
And Christina's thoughtful. I had two things. First of all, I think I've mentioned this in the past, but the American Society of Civil Engineers has the Envision program, which is put out by the International Institute of Sustainability. And it's a program that we're trying to get, implemented from the planning phase for any infrastructure, not just transportation, but they can do it up front and they get points, and they just have to sign affidavits. But it not only is for the construction phase itself, the planning, the construction phase, but it also moves into the operations phase. So, and I wanted to know if anyone, if you're going to look at the Envision program and award higher points for that, if they have a component in their project when they submit it for funding, for programming. And that was something else I was going to bring up again when we talked about the 3C letter. The other thing is I'm on the Lowell Sustainability Council here, and we did do a heat island index map, and they're working on different solutions. But we not only did the map, we tried to offer ideas to the city council members also to look at. And I think this is great that I'm seeing so many more people doing this, because I've been after this for a long time. So I'm very, very happy. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. With regards to it was the Envision rating system is what you're referencing, right? We've definitely looked at that, and I think what we're doing right now is compiling a list of tools. There's the Envision rating system. We're looking at FHWA has a vulnerability assessment tool. So we're looking at all of the different tools that we might want to use and kind of figuring out what it might require and which one is more valuable to look into. So it's definitely on our list. And I know Ethan, the tip manager, is really interested in Envision. So hopefully more to come on that. And with your work in Lowell, I would love to see the recommendations you came out with in the map. If you're comfortable sharing that, it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, sure. I'll send it out to Len.
Okay, or Stella, so
Yeah.
yeah, better, probably
Well,
better, both, yeah, so great. Thank you. Anything else, Stacy?
no, that was it. Thank you.
All right, great.
I don't know if I should bring it up when we talk about the 3C. I don't know.
All right, well, it's up to you, so, all righty, moving on, I see, Julie Wormser. Hi, Julie.
For sure, +1 with what folks have been saying around social resilience and heat stress for people having to get around. The point I wanted to make is this idea of we're going to get to the point where it's economically like exponentially more expensive to shore up the infrastructure we have. So think about the subway versus like bus rapid transit. And one of the things that would be really important to know is, when does it get too expensive? Like, what are the engineering conditions? How high is sea level? How intense is rainfall? After which it's too expensive to keep elevating things or waterproofing things, whatever. And what comes after that? Because we're going to have two phases of what do we do with what we have now? And where do we go after that fails? And I've seen, for example, particularly MassDOT and the T focus much more about how do we shore up what we have now, because it's so expensive and extensive. But I haven't seen people shift to when can't we? When will we not have enough money to do so? So it's not an engineering challenge, it's an economic challenge. And it would be really helpful for our region to understand those climate parameters that cause that shift, and for us to plan well before then, because it's going to take a bunch of research and consensus to go to something different.
So any comments, Julie, on that? I'll certainly make a comment.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I don't know if you saw the MIT and MBTA report that just came out that quantified exactly how much that flood risk is going to cost. And it's scary, and it's not clear where that money is coming from. And it's definitely time, I think, to be exploring more creative solutions while being mindful of not abandoning what we have and making sure that people can still get to where they need to go. And I think there's definitely room for more innovative solutions, and point taken. Definitely a good thing to think about.
And I think it's, that study was more about annual costs versus new capital costs. So there's going to be some cross, right? Where it is cheaper to do something new and expensive than increasing and increasingly non-worthwhile annual costs. So you would be heroes if you got some numbers and elevations or projections. That would be incredibly helpful.
I know this is going to come across as simplistic, but I just think we're going to move. It's just going to come a point. People are going to vote with their feet. And so at some point, it's just going to become too expensive for people to afford insurance or rebuilding. Just on an individual level, and they're going to move. And that will then dictate what transportation we need to provide for the people where they are, or at least where they want to go. And so it may seem far-fetched now, but I think at some point it's going to become pretty clear that we're just going to have to move away from the coast, further inland. So then what kind of planning do we do for that? And I think the sooner we start thinking about that as a possibility, the sooner we can start at least making some plans for that, so that it's not all new, when we decide, this is what people are doing, this is what we need to do to adapt. This is what the species been doing, since I think the species has been a species, just moves, when it needs to, either positively because it sees other opportunities that are better, or because the environment is changed and it's no longer sustainable where it is. So enough for me. John.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Julie. That raised a whole nother set of questions and I guess opportunities for the Commonwealth. Which gives me a new question from what I've had in addition to it. Possibly it might make sense to revise the budgeting system or the allocation system and give the climate resiliency capital necessities, forward-looking capital necessities, more of a line item, a direct one, versus having to compete necessarily with tip items and other existing roadway items, which are often going to, because they're here and now, are probably going to get a lot more attention, vote, and sympathy, and people don't want to look toward the future, but to force it on people, perhaps by making it a budget allocation item, might help make it, let's say, a portion of what's available from, let's say, the Fed and the state, let's say, bridge program or things like that. But that's one thing. And again, Judy, thank you very much. That was very informative. As you probably know, on the UPWP universe, there was another, I guess, updated assessment for the vulnerability areas along the coast, those most likely in various tiers, like 80% likelihood or 100% likelihood, et cetera, of being flooded and causing a transportation immobility situation, and be that roadway, or it could be also another subsegment, which is the, let's say, subways, the tunnels for the light rail or commuter rail. But that's on the way. I believe that's going to come through on the UPWP. I think that did survive. So that's an update that's going to happen. Question that I have, I guess, is there what are our cross-agency involvements in terms of, you noted the tip, and I think that for Ethan, that might become a new sub-segment that could be put in there with priority, more or less like we drew upon the low-hanging fruit of the community connections to fill in the gaps of being shovel ready when other projects dropped out. That could be a similar item and very useful in terms of targeting toward maybe specifics like coastal natural mitigation efforts in a community. Okay, as identified in the UPWP vulnerability study. So that could link up. Another thing is, can you get a synergy, let's say, with DCR, MIPA, and Chapter 90, and also some involvement with some of the public, or let's say nonprofits like Trustees of the Reservations, who have a lot of coastal property, who can help with some of those seagrass, marshland mitigation areas, and to beef those things up in various strategic areas. So I'll leave it with that.
Thanks, John. So Judy, there's a plate full for you. Have at it.
No, definitely great suggestions. Especially with taking a harder look at the tip criteria. It's interesting having it in there and competing with the other things that we look at, because a lot of times the projects that get selected don't have resiliency included in them, and it's just a product of competing with different interests. So I like your idea of having that be almost a requirement going in, or at least having an apportionment of projects that we specifically prioritize because of their resiliency components. I think that that's something that we can really start looking into more. And definitely looking to work more with, it was a recommendation that came out of our federal certification review last year that we work more with state and federal agencies. We're looking to extend that to work more with local groups and nonprofits, because there is so much work going on in the resiliency space in the Boston region. And as we all know, water moves. So it's really important, I think, as the MPO that provides a regional perspective to link the local concerns on the ground to what we can do, but as also what the state can provide and resources that are available to them. So definitely great suggestions, and thank you for your comments. They are duly noted.
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, this is all really interesting to me, just kind of thinking through this all together. So maybe as a suggestion, then we should probably have Judy come back next year as well too, if not sooner. One thing that I was just thinking about with what Julie Wormser was saying is about the kind of general conversation about managed retreat, at least in terms of the conversations I understand how they've been going in Cambridge. That's really not in our toolkit, right? Like, we are not planning for managed retreat. And I'm wondering how, at least as MPO staff, you've seen that conversation play out. Are there conversations about certain pieces of transportation infrastructure in particular, but maybe perhaps related infrastructure, where there are some considerations of, do we need to continue funding for the long-term restoration of certain pieces of infrastructure or not? Is that kind of played into your research and kind of what you're finding?
That's a really great comment. And I'll be honest, the question of managed retreat is really controversial. And I think from the MPO's perspective, we've been focusing on identifying those areas of concern for resilience improvements, specifically because I don't know if it's our decision to make. If a road's flooding all the time, if we don't fix it, I mean, that's a big decision to make. And I don't know that we've wanted to put ourselves in that position, if that makes sense. I think if people need a road and people are still living there and there's a need for that access, that's something that you could argue that we're kind of obligated to provide, unless, as Len said, people move with their feet and don't live there anymore. So that conversation has come up, but it's something that we're not actively considering withholding funding for a project if it's in a risky area. It's been very heavily geared towards, this is a concern, how do we fix it? How do we work with the municipality to design a project that fixes this problem, has been the perspective on that. And until I think there is more of an appetite for those conversations and retreat, we're not really touching it. I think it's a little bit out of our wheelhouse, if that makes sense. But it is important. And I think we'll maybe need to come from a more united statewide front, combined with whatever community would be impacted by those decisions.
But I also think it's helpful for us to be aware of it as a distinct possibility, because there are a lot of people who are part of this entity, but also part of the board, who have roles on select boards and things like that. And it's, I think when it comes to an equity issue, it's important for us to how to do the retreat in a way that takes care of the people who are going to probably be the least able to move, on their own, and so now you have a case where, low-income people in particular, can't move, they're stuck, and then we have funding issues, where as you know, we only have like a pretty small amount of money to spend each year, as MPO, and where do we put that money, and so it's important for us to be aware of this so that we can have those conversations with our communities, sooner, rather than later, and to take care of the most vulnerable, sooner rather than later. I'm talking a lot, so I'll stop and then move on to Sarah. Sarah, I'm sorry, my vision's really bad. So Sarah?
Okay, thank you, Leonard. I wanted to quickly talk about stormwater as a threat to transportation. And I was wondering if there are conversation to incorporate stormwater management practices into transportation project, like for example, by building green infrastructure on the road, under the road, or in the bump out. So if you have any project like that, or thinking of partnership with organization who work in this space, because at the Charter River Watershed Association, we work a lot with town who have this requirement to treat stormwater, but also this helps also to reduce the quantity, the amount of stormwater runoff that will have. So if there are like project like that are in the plan.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. There's definitely ways that we touch on stormwater improvements, mostly through our transportation improvement program, or the TIP. So if a project comes through that's suggesting improving a roadway, it is obligated to improve stormwater to some degree. As it goes through the MassDOT design process, they have their own requirements for stormwater improvement. And then we also, in our TIP criteria, we prioritize projects that improve stormwater, and specifically nature-based strategies. But any kind of stormwater improvements are encouraged. And if they can do so in a way that also has environmental benefits like bioretention, if it can filter out pollution instead of just funneling it through the sewage system, that's something that we're aware of. And I think there's always room to improve that criteria. So if you or anyone else at Charles River Watershed, I know you have a lot of thoughts on stormwater, have suggestions on how to improve our selection criteria to select the most effective ways to improve stormwater drainage, it's definitely welcome, because it's there and it can always be improved by folks like you that have that kind of direct knowledge. Oh, Len, I think you're muted.
I am. Thank you. Sorry about that. So AC and then Carl.
Really quickly, I was just going to say, I think everyone's saying managed retreat. I think what you want to call it, because what it's already being called, is climate migration. And it's expected in the next 30 years or so, 143 million people are going to be displaced. And it's, if you look at Katrina, it's already happening, or the fires in California where whole towns are just decimated. It's already happening in this country. And I think it's going to be a little bit easier to bring it up because you're going to have these examples to pull from. In fact, what's happening on the border, all this influx of immigrants from South America, is because they're going through a drought, a severe drought, and there's like no food. So, I mean, climate migration is going to be a huge problem. And I think it's better to use climate migration instead of managed retreat or anything of that sanitized kind of wording. You have to look at what it is. It's going to cause people to have to move, whether you want it or not. It's going to happen. That's it.
Thank you, AC. All right, and Carl.
Great. Hi, thank you so much, Judith, for the great presentation from Mystic River Watershed Association. And I joined a little bit late, so sorry if I'm a little redundant, but I think in any forum like this, one, to have the opportunity to highlight in all of our work, we, and especially for Greenways, we're looking to enhance both built and social resiliency simultaneously in our projects. And so just wanted to confirm that and what it sounded like is that, if looking at enhancing areas for cooling in various projects, that that increasing tree canopy is considered as a criteria for improving scoring, in the TIP criteria. And then also, are other types of open spaces incorporated or considered for scoring as well?
Yeah, thank you for your questions. So in terms of the first part with planting trees, the TIP criteria is a little bit flexible in that we award points for using nature-based solutions. We award points for reducing the urban heat island effect. So in our staff list of things that do that, tree planting is in there. So definitely increasing the urban tree canopy is something that counts towards prioritizing projects. And there's a myriad of other benefits that has, but that's definitely something that's on our list. And with open space, yes, we do have criteria for projects that increase access to open space. So transportation projects that make it easier for people to get to parks and recreational areas. And we also look at projects that avoid harm to conservation land or other kind of sensitive natural areas within their design. So if they can reduce like a roadway widening, if they can prevent that from going into a sensitive natural area to really preserve the open space, that's something we also look at. So what's really helpful is having these kinds of conversations, since that criteria in some sense can be a little bit flexible, is hearing ideas from you all in groups that work in this space to make that list longer and see of all of those activities, what's the most effective. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Leila or Leela?
Thank you. I've just been listening to the conversation and there's so many great points being talked about. And so my question is really about how we can, if there's a way we can continue to participate in the conversations, both as we can understand how we can fit in locally to support the regional picture, but also to understand the impacts to our local vulnerabilities based on regional work and adaptations that are planned.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. I think the MPO is in a really unique spot, being between the municipalities and the work going on at the state. And I think that there's a lot more we could be doing, but we have done a lot of work to kind of comb through towns, municipal vulnerability plans. We look at climate adaptation reports that towns put out because we're kind of have the ability to go that level and understand what are the concerns and how do we connect that to projects that the MPO can fund. So what we're trying to do is get more people to come to MPO board meetings or conversations like this so that, those ideas and those suggestions for projects aren't dying in documents, they're really coming to the stage. And it's definitely something that we're looking to do better on, but it's a really interesting perspective working at the regional scale. We do have a lot of power to get to the local level, but do what we do and connect the local concerns to federal funding sources. So if anyone has any thoughts on how to improve our coordination at the local level, that's definitely something that is high on our list of priorities.
Well, maybe we can have this topic on the agenda more. We have a pretty good turnout on this one, so I don't know if it's coincident with some random, aspect of people attending meetings, or if it's really the topic itself. But one way to get a sense of that is to have this topic on the agenda more. So I'm going to take one more from John, and then we're going to move on to the topic, the chair's report, since Bradley Putnam's here. And then come back to the TIF letter. John.
Yeah, getting back to or addressing Judy's point, in those 2021 minutes, we had identified that the MPO should work more with and provide more resources to help the local entities, municipalities, especially those that are poorly staffed, to generate needed programs and get them up to speed so that they can get to the 25% design, get on the tip, things like that. And this could also help, especially if it's linked to some of the resiliency priorities, which hopefully will be raised or elevated on the tip, then that could help too, especially moving your agenda ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just say that the MPO is doing that. That is a program that is undertaking for the next, I think it's the next cycle of TIP. So I had said John's going to be the last person, but I see that Caitlin, who hasn't spoken, has her hand up. So maybe this will be the last one. Caitlin.
Oops, hi, thank you so much.
Sure.
Caitlin from A Better City. Thank you so much for organizing this. Judy, what a great presentation. I'm looking forward to receiving it. Hope you'll send it out. I think the folks who already provided comments touched upon many of the things I was going to say. I just wanted to raise the issue of the grid capacity and sort of the interrelationship there with the transportation system, especially as we seek to sort of decarbonize and our electrify our transportation sector. So I'm just wondering how that's being integrated and into the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I can try to touch on that. So I think the MPO is in the early stages of diving into the electrification conversation going on in the state, and a lot of that has to do with waiting on guidance from MassDOT on how we're going to be using NEVI funds and carbon reduction program funds. And it's definitely something that's been discussed, is if we go ahead and electrify all of the buses in the Boston region, how is that going to affect the grid? And it's something that we're aware of. And I think if we're in the position where we're going to be able to invest in EV charging infrastructure and other kind of electrification infrastructure like that, it's definitely something that we're aware of that has to be done. But I think we're a little bit early in that conversation. But I want to thank you for bringing that up.
Glenn, I'm sorry to speak without raising my hand, but really quickly, is Quincy bus station finished? Because they're all electrified. Do we have any data on that? How it's going?
We do not, but maybe we can get you some data on that, for next meeting or something. But we're gonna move on now. And thank Judy, for a great presentation and a nice long Q&A session. So as you see, there is lots of interest, and so we'll be touching on this again, and maybe you can join us again or recommend that we talk with someone else. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting this conversation.
Take care. Thank you. So I see Bradley Putnam's here, and so I'm going to spend a little less time on this than I had wanted, mainly so that we can spend more time on the 3C letter, because that may end up being a tricky conversation. So Bradley, if we're able to go to the presentation, that would be great. I'm not going to ask you to do the presentation, but I want to bring the presentation up, and then I will ask to go to a particular slide and make a couple, So, yeah, okay, maybe. Okay, now, so next, and then the next one, the next slide. So here's the problem, and Bradley asked you to be here just in case I don't say something correctly, so you can just step in whenever you feel that you need to clarify or correct what I'm saying. So essentially we have $390 million in major infrastructure projects that we needed to fund. Can you go to the next slide? And so as you can see from the way that we have our allocations, our current allocations for types of programs, we have 30% allocated to major infrastructure, and that was just cap that was put in the 2019 LRTP, and 45% allocated to complete street projects. And I mentioned that one because those I think are projects that we care about a lot, as the advisory council. So the 390 million for the 2029 to 2033, that second band of the LRTP, is more for, if you allocate that much to major infrastructure, it takes 47% of the allocation, which is way above the 30%. And so the recommendation at the last meeting was that we keep those projects in, but that we reduce the complete street funding, I think, to like 30%, and then we took like 2% from someplace else. And if you think it's important, Bradley, to say exactly what those allocations are, the new allocations are, now would be the time.
Yeah, I don't know how much context everyone on the call has on this topic. Yeah. A couple meetings ago, the MPO voted on a list of projects to list in the long-range plan, 6 of which were required to be in the plan, 2 of which it was unclear, based on the research staff had done, whether they're required to be listed in the plan, but the MPO elected to include those 2 projects in the plan. And as a result of that, as Len was saying, the total, and then the other thing is the MPO also voted on allocations to investment programs in the long-range plan, which are the percentages you see in the second column there.
Right.
And so they voted to allocate 45% of available funding to the streets program, 30% of available funding to major infrastructure program, and so on down. But that resulted in a conflict whereby the estimated cost of the major infrastructure projects in the second time band of the long range plan from 2029 to 2033, the total cost of those, the total estimated cost of those projects exceeded the amount of money that the MPO allocated to that investment program. The total cost is 390 million, whereas the 30% of the funding available in that program only amounted to about 250 million. And so last week, the MPO voted to make an adjustment to account for that. And as Len was saying, they voted to reduce in the 2029 to 2033 time band, they voted to reduce the complete streets program by 15% and the intersection improvement program by 2%, such that it adds up to 100%.
Right. And so then can you go to the next slide maybe? And, oh, well, maybe back up then, because I thought there was one that kind of showed me what we had spent, on various programs over the last, maybe previous slide. No, I guess not. Maybe it was, you sent me something that kind of showed, what we had spent on various programs, in maybe the last LRTP or go ahead.
Yeah, it's the second extra slide in this presentation.
Okay, all right.
Len, is
Okay,
that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I thought it was earlier. So you can see, that we kind of underspent on major infrastructure, I guess, in the last LRTP.
Others on the call might know more about this than I do, but I believe that this slide is a compilation of the last few tips.
Okay.
That all of the spending is added together, from the most recent of which I think is the 23 to 27 tip.
Okay, gotcha. And kind of overspent on complete streets, which I'm fine with. So essentially, the reason I'm bringing this up is that I was the single no vote on changing the allocations because, as I said, leading up to the vote, I felt that before we changed allocations, we should have a deeper conversation, a larger conversation about changing those allocations. And so for me, I would be fine with keeping the allocations as they are, saying that's our goals. That is our goal as the MPO, but we're deviating from it, and we can explain why we're deviating from it, but that it is a deviation. I'm very uncomfortable changing the allocations, because it seems to me now it seems like we now have to change the allocations back with another vote. And so I did that, one, because I strongly feel that way, but two, because I feel that would be the position of the group. So I am checking in with you all to see if that is indeed the position of the group. And trust me, you don't have to back me up because you're showing any loyalty to me as the chair. I really want to know how you feel about this, and if you feel that it is okay to change the allocations, and what's the big deal, Len, that I will not pursue this as a position from the advisory council. I may pursue it as my own position, but I wouldn't pose it as something that I'm hearing from the membership. So I put that out there. We don't have to have the discussion now because it seems like we're going to have time to chime in on this, the LRTP. I think we also will, in terms of determining what the allocation should be, really get to see the needs assessment, which understandably are going to be coming out with the whole plan as opposed to before the plan. So I think when we do a deep dive into the needs assessment, maybe it'll become apparent, that the allocations should change, and we ask the board to set those plans in motion. So I just wanted to flag this now and express my appreciation, Bradley, for coming and explaining things and giving us a better context for them. So if you want to say more, Bradley, that'd be great. And then I'm going to turn to Anna Christina and John, and then Andy, and then we'll move on to the tip letter. Bradley?
You said it very well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bradley. Okay, AC?
No, actually, no, I don't disagree with you at all that you know, we should keep our focus on complete streets, because I think it incorporates a lot more municipalities other than just the direct inner core. However, I think there needs to be a hybrid where complete streets and is major infrastructure. You know, the two are not, I mean, the two sometimes are the same. So we
Right.
need a hybrid name for it so that we are seeing, oh, they're still kind of focusing on it, just it is a major improvement and it encompasses a big body, you know.
Right. Well, and in my haste me to try to provide more time me for the tip letter, I mean, that was one of the arguments made about me allowing these two programs me to that. Well, there were two programs. I mean, one of which I thought it was $140 million. We could take it out and that would solve the problem. But people were saying that, I mean, these projects aren't just major infrastructure projects, that there are complete street elements to them. So there was a comfort in keeping those in. I mean, and then kind of saying, well, we're decreasing these category, the allocations of these categories, but it doesn't mean that we are really shifting away from the priority. And I think it is a hard problem to kind of tease out what percentage of a major infrastructure project is a complete streets project. You know, and to a certain extent, I think major infrastructure projects now is a part of the definition is a threshold. Like once it goes well above 50 million, it becomes a major infrastructure project, even if it started off being as a complete street. And that threshold was increased to 50 million because I think it used to be either 25 or 30 million. So if a complete street project, due to inflation or whatever, it went over to 35 million, it was then considered a major infrastructure project, which is throwing off our distribution across our allocation. So I definitely want to put my colleagues on the board being in as positive a light as possible with respect to how they made the decision. So
how difficult is it to get like another category, like I said, a hybrid complete streets with as major infrastructure? How difficult would it be to create that category?
Already exists.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, it's a friendly group. It's partly a complexity issue, and sometimes I'm not aware of the limits of what we can do for legal reasons. I mean, or I want to say logistics, but that's the wrong word because it's not like moving things around, but maybe, yeah, I don't know. I just stopped it. I don't know. So, John.
Yeah, Bradley, could you put the listing of the, was it 4 or 5 major projects back up?
Yeah, I would defer to Stella on that. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
Those are the ones listed in the 29 to 33 time band.
Okay, what about the 33 to, was it 30? Okay, anyway, let's deal with these, because on that whole conversation of allocations, we really almost have this existing right here. You really don't need to change complete streets or the intersections, because quite honestly, if you take the Framingham one, that is in a complete street program and an intersection program. That whole spaghetti bowl of an area is going to make that whole area much more livable, mobile, safer, and just as a complete street definition would. So I think it would be drawing from both intersection and from complete streets. I think complete streets is suffering perhaps from a misconception that it's strictly neighborhood tree-lined streets. I mean, it's, this area is vital, and it is a street in an intersection. So again, I think you're right, Len. We shouldn't reallocate any of this because it's already covered.
All right. Thanks. Andy, Skylar, and then we really are going to stop and move over to 3C. So Andy.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to echo what John just said, in terms of process, which I think is, Len, what you're asking us about. I agree that the targets shouldn't be modified. I think there's still good guideposts for not just the current membership of the MPO like board itself, but also for the staff and just as a general kind of set of principles that I believe that the MPO is trying to pursue when it thinks about funding projects. So I kind of agree with you, Len, that I felt like it should have a longer conversation and a more potential opportunity for input as well. I think in order to actually make that decision, kind of feels like it was rushed because there was a perceived need to move quickly. I also like agree with John too, like a lot of these projects have complete streets elements, and I'm wondering too, just like, you know, what does that definition mean anymore? Like, is the complete streets program really trying to get at municipalities that are never going to have major infrastructure projects? Like, is that kind of really what it's pivoting to? I think that there's some consideration of things like that that would need to happen as well too, to make a decision like that. So, you know, with all those things in mind, I can say that I feel like I at least personally back kind of the position that you're taking, Len, and I think it's worth bringing up again in terms of any future conversations that happen at the MPO to be like, you know, if we're going to do this and we're going to say this is the precedent we set, we should really be sure about why we're doing it and not just let it be something that seems to be a little quixotic. So on the actual content piece, I would love to understand what's going on with this too, but just as a position piece, I think that that's generally correct.
We're gonna have a lot of time to chime in, and in terms of perceived need to move quickly, let me just tell you, because I'm going to throw Bradley Putnam under the bus. He was cracking the whip and saying, "You all need to make a decision now because we're over budget and we need to get the LRTP out." You know, so Skylar.
I wrote a note in the chat to cover some of my thoughts about the goals and investments chart. I think that complete streets is a great thing. I really think that they need to be followed up on by all levels of government, cities, towns, and all the rest of it. But I think that over-investing in those, as I would characterize it, is not a good thing. It's going to a lot of that will happen anyway with appropriate encouragement. But to short sheet transit modernization, especially with the T on its current condition, really not a good idea. And intersection improvements, that's a vague term, but intersections tend to be where accidents happen. So improving intersections tends to reduce the number of traffic accidents and also facilitate the flow. And God knows we're getting more and more emphasis on crosswalks and other sorts of things that are impede vehicle flow. And, you know, so what? Pedestrians are more important. But on the other hand, the more you impede vehicle flow, you get exhaust pollution and all the rest of that. There's environmental reasons why getting people from one point to another is a good idea. Quickly is a good idea.
Thanks, Skylar. So, okay, I'm now going to thanks everyone for your input. I'm now going to turn it over to Franny to talk about the 3C letter, and I will ask Stella to keep an eye on forum and if people start dropping off, you know, I'll flag folks at 4:15, and everyone be free to go, of course, anytime, but especially then. And if we haven't made a decision, then we'll just keep an eye on quorum and make a decision before we lose quorum. So, Franny.
Hi. So I offered when we didn't have we didn't really have people from the committee stepping forward to be on the 3C committee. I thought we might have been suffering from the reasons that I, in the past, didn't often step forward because I didn't really understand the process. So I really appreciate Stella setting up those 2 meetings last week where we could really hash out what the process is. And so on Wednesday, we talked about, pretty much educated whoever was there about what the 3C process is, and the fact that right now we're just commenting on the transportation improvement program, but that at other times we focus on and send letters in support of the other programs. So Friday, we collected a lot of ideas. Even though I offered to bring it together, my talent ends, my expertise ends in being able to summarize what people wanted. So I went to people after the meeting. Thank you, Layla. And so I would love to share my screen and show what I've come up with so far. And my thought is either if people think this is close, and as I said, I really depend on the input from all of you. I tried to incorporate comments I've gotten from Andy and from Anna Christina, and I have a few questions for some people that were at the meetings last week. I want to acknowledge John for sending in comments, but we were only focusing on the tip, and some of your comments were on UPWP, so I didn't incorporate them, obviously. So anyway, can I share my screen, or do you want to, Stella, because you have the same file?
Yeah, I have it open now. If that's easier, I can share it for any other way.
Yeah. And I can write in it.
Sure.
So you got a very bulleted version of this, and then what I found is that people tended to get into a whole discussion on every detail that we talked about. So what I wanted was that for the people that cared about particular pieces to, you know what, I can put in the link in the chat. I'm going to put the link to that. So if people are having trouble seeing it on the screen and you want to just split your screen and look, that's where I'm working from right now. So I thought what I want to do with this short time is to read through it. And the kind of input I need is ordering, and also where I didn't know what it was. Sometimes I just mentioned something in bullet form where I didn't know the main message that somebody wanted to share. And rather than get into discussions about them, I'd love to just sort of see if people want to say, after we can read through it briefly. And then if people want to say, I think you should leave out this, or I think you need to add this, then I talked to Stella about having a meeting. We don't have to turn in the comments until May 17th. And what we could do is create early next week a time to come together. Hopefully we could get a quorum for like a half-hour meeting to approve. And the input that I would want between now and then is actual comments on specific editorial comments. So I thought I want to read this aloud right this minute. So dear members of the Boston Region MPO, the Regional Transportation Advisory Council is an independent group of citizen and regional advocacy groups, municipal officials, and agencies charged with providing public input on transportation planning and programming to the Boston Region MPO. The Advisory Council reviewed the MPO's federal fiscal year 2024 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program. We'd like to offer the following comments for your consideration. So remember, these aren't in a particular order right now. We appreciate that MPO staff have more closely involved us in the development of the TIP. Ethan Lapointe, I'll get the correct spelling, Ethan. The TIP manager has given presentations and participated in question and answer sessions at several meetings. We encourage you to do this for all the programs, UPWP, TIP, and LRTP. And my comment on that came from one of the members, is we have had presentations on all of these. So I would turn that more into a thanks Do people agree with that?
Yes,
Okay.
I do.
And you
I mean,
remember, you don't have to have all the final words. That what I'm trying to prevent in such short time is getting into whole discussions of these. But and I encourage you, if you are at your computers and are on this file, you could just put in caps, you know, comment here, you know, that's fine with me. Okay, we are glad to hear that the Boston Region MPO is looking to create an annual funding scheme to support bike share in the region, especially for small municipalities. If someone wanted to add, that was said, I heard that at the meetings. If someone wanted to add supportive sentences, I would appreciate it. In the executive summary, figure ES3 compares the funding within the subregions of Metropolitan Area Planning Council as to the percent of population, percent of employment, and percent of federal aid roadway miles. We would appreciate hearing how this data affected this year's TIP funding and how the MPO would like to use this data moving forward. We also thank you for increasing clarity over the last few years of the 6 evaluation criteria and 6 investment programs that guide the funding decisions. That's in the executive summary, and that particular bullet comes from me, and I'm open to edit. We continue to encourage the MPO and staff to think through how projects progress through each stage of the TIP funding process. We appreciate the MPO's decision to pilot a program that will help get municipalities to a design readiness of at least 25%. This could also become a more holistic assessment of what supports and at what stage projects are programmed into the TIP. We would like to see the pilot expanded and continued, as we see that some municipalities are less equipped than others to bring projects to that level of design. The allocated $4 million is likely to fund only 2 projects. We would also appreciate a guest at one of our RTAC meetings with inside information on how implementation will occur to visit RTAC and give us a, oh, sorry, that was, I think,
We could
extra
drop-
worded.
we could drop that sentence because we'll just take that on ourselves to do it, you know, because they're not going to say
Okay.
no or anything.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah,
so all we have
you're
to do
right.
is ask. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Okay, we wholly support the, so the reason that part was a little bit tough was it was combining 2 people's comments.
Yeah,
We wholly support the MPO's willingness to see that large infrastructure projects include a percentage of improved transit and complete streets portions programmed to the TIP or receiving higher points once being scored. We appreciate the bike share funding included this year's TIP. Actually, that was elsewhere. Similar to the recent focus on transit and complete streets, we would like to see a future willingness to increase points for projects that include a sustainability and resiliency component. We could come back to these 2. I didn't know if these were the same. These were,
They're the same.
okay.
Yeah.
So I would love to get your input on what to say. I wasn't clear what to say about that and whether it moves to the top, you know, where the bike share. And there were some things that were sort of overarching changes, the bike share and that risk mitigation. And so again, we could order. In the when it rains, it pours department, we encourage the MPO to have a bank of projects ready for when there's a surplus of funds due to a project being postponed. It would be helpful to include estimates for when a project will be ready for construction. Large projects funded in the first year of the TIP are often delayed and moved out a year. There aren't a lot of projects ready to be slotted into the first year, so MassDOT projects end up being funded. And related to that, RTAC would like to understand the history and policy for last minute additions or amendments to the TIP. Are last minute projects included each year, and do they tend to be those proposed by MassDOT or the MBTA? What are the boundaries of the effort to work with the MBTA to move transit projects into near-term years? This next one came from a comment from John, and so I would love, again, a fill out. Rutherford Avenue is funded in 2027 in this TIP. We're concerned about it continuing to slip backward in the schedule. When there's successful initiatives of promising technology funded in one area of the Boston MPO region, microtransit pilots, for example, it would be helpful for a top-down look from the MPO at how the same service or technology can be tested in various parts of the region. rather than be reactive and receive applications from parts of the region or municipalities that happen to enjoy active local leadership at the time, the MPO should on its own declare certain efforts as worthy of a try regionally and offer technical assistance and funding of similar pilots in multiple areas. Without that regional view, I couldn't think of the right word, meaning creative. Planning and execution of creative efforts will continue to be sporadic, geographically lopsided, and more difficult to scale up. And transit does not stop at town lines. This is also coming from John, but it's usually comes from me. Transit does not stop at town lines, RTA lines, or even MPO lines. RTEC recommends a focus on funding of better interregional transit connections. So the question is this closer? Are there things, I just love to hear comments on what you think we should do, because it's 2 minutes from when we really say we end, and whether, I know, Len, you said, oh, maybe we don't have to send out a letter this year, but I think I don't want to let it slide just because we had a little bit of a vacuum of volunteers. I think I'd like to plow forward and make it happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, the vacuum is people just don't have the time to do it,
Right,
you know,
right.
and so you offered to do it, you know, so I appreciate that, you know, but then I think we can't then like try to put it back on the people who said they didn't have time to do it, you know.
No, but what
so,
my question, so my question is
so
for
I'm gonna
me
finish.
collecting it. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot closer. I mean, what I'd seen before and when we talked earlier was just the bullet list that had no real substance to it. This has a lot of substance to it. And I think it'll be up to the group to say whether this is close enough for them to say they want to let it go with some finishing touches without another meeting, or whether they feel there needs to be another meeting, you know. I mean, I'm in the latter camp, but that will be up to the group to decide. I'm done. Thank you.
What's the latter camp?
The latter camp would be that, I mean, let's work on this some more and then have another quick meeting, you know, next week to approve it as a group. I mean, but if the group but if most people here feel like this is good enough and they trust me, whoever wants to continue working on this and send it off in the name of the group, I will do the majority wants, because, well, that's how our democracy works here in this group. That's it. Thanks. So you're running the show at this point, so I'll let you call in the hands, Franny.
Okay, Skylar. Skylar, your hand is up. Is that from before, or
I think
is it new?
no, I think he's just muted, you know.
We'll come back to Skylar and go to Ana Cristina.
No, I was gonna say, I agree with Len. I would not mind flushing this out a little bit more and having another meeting. I did attend the last 2 meetings. I will attend the other one for you. But I was thinking that Len's comments at the end about fiscal, I mean, this is where we can introduce the whole climate migration being discussed, being considered, weighted into projects that are especially a rehabilitation of something, any rehabilitation projects, intersection projects, stuff like that. If it was impacted by climate, should it score lower? That's it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, and Andy.
So I think in general, all the kind of outline that I saw earlier today, it looks pretty good. And I'm glad to see that it's mostly filled in now in more of a narrative form. So I think I'm generally excited by how quickly it came together, Franny. So as somebody who worked on last year's letter and previous letters, I think it's actually pretty cool to see it all come together too. As far as process and answering or responding to what Len said, I will not be able to be at any of that next week. I'm going to be away at a conference, but I think as long as it skips, as long as the letter generally sticks to what's in here, and I'm hearing some other suggestions that I feel are also worthy of inclusion. It seems like as far as a process, it seems to, whatever seems to work best is probably what makes sense. And definitely have my support, I think, in if I'm not able to attend, if there is a meeting scheduled.
Skylar, is your hand raised? Raise your hand if you can hear us, Skylar. Nope. Okay.
You know what, he uses the chat, the chat box a lot. Maybe.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, no, it says, well, I don't know. Okay, so, well, in any case, I'd be happy to go with your, because of my lack of professional background, Len, I really depend on the input from everybody. So I would love to set up a short meeting. Like say Monday.
But that would be the meeting to approve this, right? So there will be work on it beforehand.
But
meaning
yeah,
that-
people could, but we can't have a quorum of people working on it. But I think if a very few people
Well, just to be
sort of-
clear, the
Yeah.
3C committee meeting is a subset. It's not a quorum meeting of the advisory council. And so then we don't have to worry about a quorum of the 3C committee,
Okay.
working on things, so I think the whole point of having it not be a quorum of the advisory council is so that we can collaborate fully, so then we can collaborate on this document, to our heart's content, and then come up with something so that when, we come together as the full advisory council, we can then sign off on this thing with some more input from those who are there. So I think maybe the best course of action here would be to see if we could get people to say, okay, look, we can go ahead and send a letter. We'll trust you to do more work on it, but it will be more of us doing work on it as opposed to just one person doing work on it. So you'll set up the meeting. Hopefully, whoever shows up. If it is we'll advertise it as a full meeting. So get the notice out, in adherence with OML, have an agenda, one item probably to do this letter and approve it. And then we have a quorum. We do the vote. If not, then we have this kind of there's a word for it, but contingent vote, that we are approving it. How does that sound?
That's good. But do you want to have a backup plan? I mean, so I would move that we would, the 3C committee will tweak this and work on it. And then we come together at a planned meeting. I was just making sure we have 48 hours. Say, I don't know, Monday at 3, whatever the planned meeting is. And if we do not have a quorum, then my question is, could we, so my motion is that we sort of generally give this a go ahead. And that if we don't have a quorum, then that we feel okay about sending in some version of this.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I said.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
all right.
no, but this is a motion. I was making a motion.
All right.
And then the hope is that we do get a quorum to support it.
Okay. Well, I can't second as the chair. So thank you, Franny.
Okay.
So just to be clear, Franny, the motion that you've put forward right now is to approve the general gist of this letter pending a few more edits that members of the 3C committee will make.
Yes.
At some point early next week.
And no, sometime between now and early next week. And that we will have a public meeting of the whole, right, Len? We'll have a public meeting of the whole RTAC.
Yeah, and I'm going to suggest next Wednesday. Could we maybe do it? Are you available next Wednesday? Pretty much the same time, like maybe 2:30, 3 o'clock.
So the only thing here is that the TIP public comment period officially closes on Wednesday, so we do need the letter by Wednesday.
Right. So if we did it at 2:30, we'd be coming in under the wire, So I mean, we pretty much have it edited and ready to go with some minor tweaks. So it does leave no slack. And I'm generally not a big fan of no slack, but it does give more time to work on it in case some of us aren't available to work on this. on the
If that's
weekend.
the case, I can meet a little bit earlier and I would second Franny's motion, but is there any way we can send out an electronic form to the group as a whole, like on Monday, say, and I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have an issue working on it over the weekend, I can help you out with that.
Yeah, no, that's fine with me.
So then I guess I won't second Franny's, we'll send out the final version by Monday night-ish.
Well, why don't we send it as a public meeting announcement by 2:30 or whatever time we're gonna meet on Wednesday, 48 hours before that.
Yeah.
It has to be in on Wednesday though, correct?
No, but she's saying send it out, as a public document to go along with the public meeting being on Wednesday. So it has to go out 48 hours in advance. So that would mean Monday afternoon at 2:30, it would go out. Understand, AC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
One,
and-
I don't want to be the wrench in these plans, but I am not available at 2:30 on Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
But
Is there
I
there
I
another
can
time?
have potentially another staff member step in, or we can find another time. I'm open to whatever folks prefer.
So, or
Or
is
if
it,
you-
are you not available on Wednesday at all, or is it 2:30 at this point?
Just 2:30 to, I can move the 3. So between 2:30 and 3 at least.
Alright.
We can work
So
around
would-
that.
Would lunchtime on Wednesday work?
Or you, yeah, that could work. That could work. for me.
Okay, like noon?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
that,
let's make it by noon. So we'll tweak this until Monday at noon or 11:30 and then or just over the weekend, and then we'll send it to you Monday morning, Stella. And
Okay.
you can put it out with the meeting announcement for noon on Wednesday, when people from this committee will come together and approve it or not. So, but we need to vote on that motion to go through this process.
sure. And we have a second, so,
I'll second.
yeah. So I think
All
that's
right.
it. Yeah. I think we
Do
discussed
you
this
want me
plenty. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Call the, okay. So Len Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond,
Yes.
Anna Cristina Fragoso,
Yes,
Andy Reeker,
Yes.
Skylar Larrabee. I don't know if he can hear us. Scott Zadakis,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
David Montgomery,
Yes.
and Fred Mosley.
Yes.
Okay, so that carries.
Great. Excellent. Well,
Thank you,
thanks.
everybody.
Thank you, Franny. Thank you so much for doing this and persevering and pushing it to make it happen. So I very much appreciate it. So we'll get this thing done. Great. And I'm sorry for keeping folks 10 minutes longer. Hopefully you thought it was worth it. And overall, I thought it was a very good meeting, especially on Judy's presentation. So with that, folks, take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, the motion to adjourn by AC and a second by Franny Osmond. Without any opposition, we will adjourn. Right. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
See some of you next week.
Yeah, I look forward to anybody's comments before then. Okay, bye.
I'll stick around, Stella, in case you want to say anything.